If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Though it may be known as America's pastime, baseball has spread across the world. Though the MLB is trying to come back, there is still some money to be made overseas, and Greg Peterson is going worldwide to hit a grand slam for your bankroll. From the return of baseball in the States to daily KBO picks, all the bases covered on the Baseball Betting Podcast with Greg Peterson. So here is the International King of Swing.
A special hello and welcome to lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Podcast with myself, Greg Peterson. We have got a tremendous show for you as we're going to be joined by our good buddy who is currently, much like myself, furloughed at the Vegas Ads and Information Network, but with more sports coming back, things are looking more promising for both of us. Jeff Parles, he now is doing the podcast Sports Who Knows with one of our other good buddies on this podcast, Jake Asman. So we're going to be talking to him in the second segment, and it's going to be a wide range of conversation. We're going to be talking to him a little bit about the logistics that the MLB faces with trying to come back, what they can maybe take away from Korea, and we're actually going to be talking about some Korean and Taiwanese baseball and how he's been betting that. So it is going to be a whole boatload of fun. And in the final segment, I do give you a side and total on every game on either today or tomorrow's Las Vegas betting board for the KBO as we touch them all. I say today or tomorrow's because the games are going to be going on at 10 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 1 a.m. Eastern. So depending on what time zone you're in, your date is going to vary, which I still think is very, very weird, but we venture on. And as per usual, if you have a question that you'd like answered on this podcast, fire it into my timeline at Junior_1. It can be involving just KBO baseball basics, baseball betting, what have you. And I did get a lot of people asking about the best time to line shop, and I'm going to be touching upon this in the second segment with Jeff Parles. It's going to be towards the end of the interview. We're going to be talking about just the importance of having outs, even if you don't necessarily bet with a book. There are a couple books out here in Las Vegas in which you're able to download the app. I think that you're actually able to take a look at the odds in various states as well, just as a little bit of a point of reference, because I typically encourage whenever it comes to line shopping to have up like a Don Best screen, these live odds trackers like with Wager Talk, with Las Vegas Advisor, all these things. And KBO games, as of right now, they're not showing up on the Don Best screen really at all. So that is something that you do want to have in your arsenal, that paired with being able to look at some of the odds of even some of the other states. Like I've been using the FanDuel odds and just tracking them and comparing them to the Nevada and offshore odds myself. So I do think that that's a very useful tool to look at. And like I said, I'm going to be getting into that a little bit later with Jeff Parles. But now it is that time of the podcast in which we take a little bit of a look back as to what we all saw yesterday in the KBO as we get a little bit of a roundup as to yesterday / this morning's action.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Unfortunately for us, 3 out of the 5 games that were supposed to have a first pitch of 1 a.m. Pacific, 4 a.m. Eastern on Saturday got rained out, but we still had 2 entertaining games. The one that was really entertaining was the ESPN game. That would be the Kia Tigers hitting the road face-off against the Samsung Lions. The Kia Tigers actually got out to a 2-0 lead. They were leading going into the bottom of the 5th inning, and then things just unraveled from there. I'm Ki Young wound up only being able to go 4 1/3 innings. He gave up 4 runs, all of which were earned. This is someone that has certainly had his struggles out there in the KBO, and all but one of his seasons in the KBO ERA of a 4.50 or greater, so he certainly wasn't able to get the job done. But where things really fell apart for Kia was the 8th inning. If you wound up having the under in this game, it actually looked pretty decent. The Lions were up by a count of 5-2 going into the 7th inning. I know that this number closed between 9 and 9.5 with a total. Well, that 9 really fell in the 8th inning because the Lions, they put up a 9 spot in that inning. They were able to get 3 field goals. It was the Samsung Lions being able to bat around, and they were able to get all those runs without a single home run and without a guy getting more than 3 RBI. It got so bad that Hung Woon Hoo, who is a second baseman for the Kia Tigers. He wound up closing out the inning, so that was not good. And Woon Tae-in was able to give the Samsung Lions a pretty decent start. He wound up being able to give the team 5 innings. He gave up 2 runs, both of which were earned in that time span, and from there he was able to settle down. In the bullpen, they were certainly able to hold down the fort. They gave up just 1 hit in 4 innings, so the Samsung Tigers got the job done. And for the Hanwha Eagles, it was a little bit of Heartbreak Hotel on Saturday morning as well, as they wind up losing to the Kiwoom Heroes by a count of 5-3. With the Eagles, they wound up taking a 3-1 lead into the bottom of the 6th inning, and then the bottom of the 6th inning was just a house of horrors for this team. They wound up having a pass ball that wound up scoring a couple runs. That compounded with an error led to a 3 spot in the 6th inning for the Heroes. And for the Heroes, they were able to get a home run off the bat of Lee Jong-hoo. He's really starting to develop himself, 21 years old. In his first 3 years at the KBO, hit at least .324. That is his second home run of the year. He had just 6 home runs each of the last 2 years, so perhaps he's starting to develop a little bit of pop. And in this one, for the Kiwoom Heroes, Han Hyun Lee, who is a little bit of a converted reliever, he gave the team actually a pretty good start. He wound up going 6 innings. He gave up in that time span 3 runs, all of which were earned, but he did a good job of being able to control the walks. This is someone that did not start a single game in the 2019 season, so a very good sign for Kiwoom. The bullpen from there, they wind up going 3 innings. They give up 2 hits, but what you do want to know for this as well is Ju Sang-woo, who it looks like is going to be the closer for this team. He wound up giving the Heroes 20 saves last season. He's now been used in back-to-back days and 3 of the team's last 4, so got to think that these Saturday night / Sunday morning games are going to be on the full for him. And for the Eagles, the big takeaway for this team is the fact that Song Kwon Min was able to go yard in this game. He is someone that has not necessarily been much of a power guy in his time in the KBO, but with that said, he's already got 2 home runs so far this year, hitting .474, so he's gotten off to a pretty solid start. So that's what we all saw from the KBO. Oh man, this is just still really weird to say. From Saturday morning, I'm going to be getting this confused for like 3 months, so bear with me on that one. But with that said, a man that is always very willing to bear with me, always brings it, that'd be Jeff Parles. We're going to be talking to him about line shopping when it comes to KBO, some of the logistical hurdles that the MLB is going to be facing, and so much more. And that is on the other side right here on the Baseball Betting Podcast with myself, Greg Peterson.
Greg is calling in a pinch hitter from the Overtime Network hotline.
And we are back here in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Podcast with myself, Greg Peterson. It is great to be joined by our next guest. Much like myself, he is currently on furlough with the Vegas Stats and Information Network, but as we see, we've got a baseball season, not necessarily in the States, but we do have a baseball season, so obviously promising signs for both of us. This is a man that does a great job of just being able to keep up with a little bit of everything, and in the meantime, he is doing a podcast with another good friend of this fine podcast as well. It is called Sports Who Knows? And he does that along with Jake Asman. First things first, hopefully you like the emphasis on the question mark, as it is Jeff Parles trying to be right here on the podcast. So you can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Parles. And Jeff, great to have you on the podcast today. How are you?
Great. It's odd times, as we've talked about on this pod and your college basketball pod as well. But there is baseball being played in the Far East, obviously the KBO and the league in Taiwan, which, Greg, I'm not sure you have looked at in Taiwan. But they, of course, field totals every single game, which I've at least looked at and had a little chuckle to myself about.
I have not really bet the Taiwanese league, but I have noticed those high totals. And what's insane is that the over's sitting at like a 2/3 rate. It's absolutely insane. If you've just been blindly betting the over in Taiwan, you've actually made yourself a whole bunch of money, which I think is interesting. And Jeff, I've gotten into the KBO the last couple of weeks. It's been a lot of fun for myself, and I know that you've gotten into it as well. What do you notice with regards to the KBO and some of the parallels to the MLB? Because I think that the biggest thing that people need to know with the KBO versus the MLB is the fact that you see a lot more emphasis on small ball and the fact that these pitchers, they go more than 5 innings. You're noticing that it's not like, oh, pitch count is at 90. We have to pull out our starting pitcher. They're going to let him go a little bit more.
Yeah, look, it's an older sense of baseball. It's what we would have seen about 30 years ago. Small ball and pitchers going longer. Greg, one thing that happened in this league last year, I'm sure you talked about it. They de-juiced the baseball in the middle of last season, and you saw the home run rate plummet in that league. And look, there are some names that you'll recognize. I know in tonight's slate, tonight on the West Coast in early morning in the Eastern time zone, you'll see Australia go, and you'll see former Minnesota Twin, whose name's escaping me, pitch as well for the Twins over there. Excuse me, for whoever the Dinos are playing. I guess they are playing the Twins.
Twins,
look,
yeah.
Look, it's different. It is baseball, though. And look, it's at least something to watch. And I know I'll be watching the 10 o'clock Pacific Saturday start for the games on Sunday in Korea.
Don't worry, if you're having a struggle with it, I am myself, because it's like, do I call these Saturday night games? Do I call these Sunday morning games? Or do I just call them games? As we've got Jeff Parles joining me right here on the podcast. And at the very least, when we have that debate, it means that we do have live baseball. That's something that we don't have in the MLB, but at the very least, with a few baseball leagues returning out in the continent of Asia, we do now finally have a little bit of a blueprint for the MLB, because we've been seeing all these different proposals with Major League Baseball. The one bubble hub in Arizona, the two-tiered league with Florida and Arizona, and then you'd have the Cactus League and the Grapefruit League. Most recently, they came out with what I think would be the best one, breaking it down by 3 geographical regions, the West, the East, and the Central. I do think that that's the best way of going about it, because if you put everything in one bubble, we're finding this out from the UFC, if you have everything all together and one guy gets infected and tested positive, it can derail the whole thing. UFC got lucky because it was Jacare Sousa who wound up testing positive for the UFC. He was actually from the state of Florida. He was training out there in the state of Florida. It's not like he had to travel by plane and wasn't really in contact with a lot of the other UFC fighters. So they got really lucky there. And what I think for MLB would be the best case is having these teams in their home ballpark. They just sort of travel around like the East region, the Central region, and everything like that. So that way, if you do have the unfortunate circumstance of, say, someone on the Milwaukee Brewers tests positive, you don't have to shut down all 30 teams. You can just shut down the Milwaukee Brewers, whoever their opponent is, and maybe a team that they played a few days earlier.
Well, the counterpoint to that, Greg, is we're starting to see, well, in Germany, they're trying to come back with the Bundesliga, and a Bundesliga 2 team, Dynamo Dresden, just got ordered into a 14-day quarantine because multiple players tested positive. Look, Greg, it's going to be a bizarre season of Major League Baseball if it happens. I saw today that the regionalizing is the plan that they're probably going to give to the players, the owners, that is, on Tuesday. 80 games, 90 games, probably 82 would probably be the number of games they'll settle on. It's going to be extremely difficult to get this done. And in the end, I do think baseball is going to forge ahead with the plans to play. It's just a matter of, especially with them going in their home ballparks, and I think that will be what ends up happening. What happens when 5 guys on the Pittsburgh Pirates test positive? What are we going to do then? Are we going to shut down the entire team? Or are we going to basically say, all right, the Altoona curve, the 25 players that we're having in Altoona during this, you're up, guys. It's just a completely bizarro situation where I don't know if you can fully handle in this circumstance, unless if you're legitimately testing every single person every single day, right as they get to the ballpark. You can get a 5-minute rapid test. A lot of logistics. I like the plan on paper, though. I like it on paper. You would see the Mets and the Yankees would play more than they've played in the past. The White Sox and the Cubs, the Dodgers and the Angels, the Giants and the A's. I mean, you get a lot of intra-area rivalries that you don't normally see going at it double-digit times a year potentially. So we'll see what happens, Greg. We're going to have to see how other leagues around the world do before Major League Baseball really even takes a stab at it. And also, too, Greg, what happens with the PGA? What happens with NASCAR? What happens if the 1 positive case in the UFC fights? What happens if that turns into 8 positive cases? There are so many what-ifs at this point.
I totally agree with you, as we do have Jeff Parles of the new podcast, Sports Who Knows, joining me right here on the podcast. And there certainly is a lot of logistical issues, and we know this as well. These states are opening up sort of on a individual basis. It's not one of these things where, all right, Georgia opened up, the entire country is open. We're going to have some states like the southern states, like I mentioned, with Georgia, Florida, which means that you can host games with the Atlanta Braves, Miami Marlins, Tampa Bay Rays, all that stuff. But the state of California probably going to be one of the last states to open up. And we've seen this in the minor leagues as well, where you sort of have like an expansion minor league team. And I know all about this because the Milwaukee Brewers have done it actually a couple times the last couple years, where they wound up having their team like play 50 straight road games to begin the year. How awkward would that be? Now, with the MLB season, we're talking about probably starting it up in early July, but I think that we could still be in a case where you might see like 2/3 of the states open and or close, and then the other third are closed and or open, and you might have to do one of these just herky-jerky schedules where you have one team at the road for like 50 straight days.
Again, Greg, this goes back to just how difficult this is going to be. Look, in California, Gavin Newsom, the governor there, who I think has done, and not to get political, I think he's done as good of a job as any of the governors out in the entire country has done with this so far. There's a reason that California has not turned into a complete just cavalcade of cases and death except for Los Angeles County. But look, I think, Greg, there's a distinct possibility that, and this is what makes the Western Division very difficult. The Dodgers, the Angels, the A's, the Padres, and the Giants all have to play. And keep in mind, too, Seattle won't be easy, too, because the state of Washington's one state that's going to be late to reopen as well. I mean, there's a shot that Arizona plan ends up actually happening for these California teams and possibly for Seattle as well. It'll just be fascinating to see if Major League Baseball can get off the ground. What will happen for the teams in California and the Seattle Mariners and obviously the Yankees and the Mets, who obviously play in New York, which has been the hardest hit area in the entire world for the COVID-19.
Yeah, it certainly is a nightmare trying to figure out all this out. Well, be talk as we do have Jeff Parles here on the podcast, but the one non-nightmare is the fact that we do have baseball right now, and when it comes to the KBO, like I said, you have been putting down a couple bets. What has really been working for you? Because I've been noticing this. Favorites have been doing very well in the KBO. Now, I know that the KT Wiz a couple days ago were able to get a nice upset win over the Doosan Bears. They were right around like plus 175, plus 180-ish, but we are really noticing that these teams are favored in a lot of these games. They have been able to win on the run line. You've had a couple upsets, but the upsets are really ones in which we shouldn't be too surprised by, like Drew Gagnon not getting the job done for the Kia Tigers. I mean, I think everyone and their brother saw that one coming. And I think that this is a league in which you have a couple teams that have become darlings, the NC Dinos and the Lotte Giants, two teams that have really risen up. And it's really the teams that are hitting the deep ball that are having the success so far this year.
Well, you obviously have a few names that people recognize. Obviously, Tyler Saladino, Aaron Altair. You mentioned Drew Gagnon, former Met, Chris Flexen. That was one thing I attempted the other day. I attempted to fade Flexen. That did not work.
The Flexen fade!
Yeah.
It is a tradition unlike any other, the flex and fade.
Chris Flexen had to a point at the 8th highest ERA in Major League Baseball history for a person who's thrown at least 150 innings. That didn't work because the Doosan Bears had a big offensive outing that day, so Flexen was average, but it didn't matter. I will say this, Greg, I really been looking at the Dinos because the Dinos obviously are off to this really hot start. They were a dog early morning Friday here in the States. I bet them there. They won. Lost my other bet, which was the fate of Flexen. I had my third KBO bet in the Saturday night in Nevada, Sunday afternoon in Korea. I'm doing something that I should not normally be endorsed, but I'm betting on Dan Straley and the little Giants, who are undefeated still, and that number's only gone up. I got minus 125. I missed the absolute best of the number, which was minus 110. But I'm on Straley today. I'll lean on the guys who at least have had a little bit success at some point in Major League Baseball. Straley has been the definition of average in his MLB career when he pitched in the States, but I'm on Straley. That's basically the only thing that I'll be looking at. And look, it's too early to tell on what's working and what's not. We're only a week in.
Absolutely. And what I noticed about the Lotte Giants, 7+ runs in every one of their games so far this year. You mentioned Action Dan Straley. He actually was able to mount a win when the Orioles were a massive underdog against the Red Sox last year. And I will say this, you mentioned it with your bet. You wound up getting minus 125 on this one. It opened up minus 110. There were actually a couple books that opened up Lotte as an underdog, which I think is ridiculous. As I'm doing this podcast, we are looking at it at minus 145 at Circa. And I think that it is very important for the listeners to know, jump on these numbers early, because these steam moves, they come in right when the numbers post. And typically, if you're looking at when these numbers post, I would say right around 2:30, 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern, which is 11:30 to noon Pacific. Leave yourself a couple outs. Even if you don't necessarily use a Nevada betting app like Circa, like your Caesars, they allow you to be able to view the odds for free. And I think that that's big because you don't really have live odds trackers that you're able to see like on a Don Best Screen. Oh, the Kia Tigers are getting steamed or anything like that. So signing up for these apps, even if you don't bet with them, is just very good for having a point of reference.
Well, I will say, Greg, I actually had a reasonable job of setting up my outs because the NCAA tournament was supposed to happen 2 months ago. And I wanted 5-6 outs. Outs obviously being places to bet here in Nevada on the app because you would be watching in one spot and you want a line shot. And with enough places in town, at least in Nevada, and of course, if you're in New Jersey or you're betting offshore, wherever, you could have double-digit outs pretty easily. I have money in a lot more outs than I normally did. I kept it to a few outs beforehand just because I very rarely would go down to Fremont. I would very rarely end up making a bet at Caesars. But those outs are now outs for this. So yeah, just line shop if you have the apps. And a lot of places, if you're in Nevada, again, you kind of have the worst of it if you're not betting offshore because you have to go to these drive-through windows now at the South Point or Will Hill, and the South Point doesn't even have KBO, or at Circus Sports down at Fremont Street at the Golden Gate. So if you have access and have money in the apps, go fire away if you think you got an advantage on any of this. There's also plenty of soccer happening now across the world, assuming, like we said before, if the Bundesliga does get off the ground a week from today.
Yes, sir. As we do have, the Bundesliga does not go, we still have Nicaragua and we've got Belarus, which I'm sure.
Greg, Nicaragua ends. This is the final in Nicaragua. So we'll be down to the Belarusians and the Koreans.
Well, we had Nicaraguan soccer. Oh, God. Well, it's a good thing we've got the KBO at that point. I wasn't going to be betting any soccer anyway, and I certainly have not been able to get into the Russian table tennis, which we all know is a fancy way of saying ping pong.
Oh, come on. That's fun. I intentionally made one bet as soon as I got back to Nevada, Greg, and it was a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Who doesn't love betting on ping pong?
Exactly. At least you called it ping pong, so thank you. Don't try to dress it up and say Russian table tennis. We all know it's ping pong. You're betting on ping pong. There's no question about it. And one thing that there's also not a question about, the fact that you and Jake Hasman are doing a great job with Sports Who Knows, a new podcast right here on the Overtime Network of podcasts. So I'd like to close it up with this. Let the good people know just a little bit more about that podcast and what you're all doing and how they can follow you on social media.
Yeah, just wherever you listen to your podcasts, go look for Sports Who Knows ? And you'll find us on iTunes or wherever you listen. Get me on the tweets at Jeff Parles, and we have good content, Greg. So it'll be a fun listen if you tune in.
Oh, yes. If you like this interview, you're going to love the podcast, and Jeff always does a great job. So big thanks to Jeff Parles for joining me right here on the Baseball Betting Podcast with myself, Greg Peterson. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast, and it's always nice to say this. It's been too long that I give you a side and total on every game on today's Las Vegas betting board as we touch them all.
Welcome back to the Baseball Betting Podcast with Greg Peterson as we're off to a quality start, and now it's time to walk it off in a grand fashion.
And a big thanks to Jeff Parles, our good buddy from the Vegas Stats and Information Network and now doing the podcast Sports Who Knows, for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast in which we give you a side and total on every game on today's Las Vegas betting board as we touch them all.
If a game is listed on the betting board, Greg has a side and a total on it, so it is time to touch them all.
Note that any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter feed at @GN_D1. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order as per usual, and as I've iterated on this podcast the past few days, you really can't bet these games pitcher dependent unless you go to Pinnacle. There might be a few other books that might start to do pitcher dependent, but as far as I'm seeing, Pinnacle is the only one, so you're really betting on the team and the team only, so you do want to note that. And we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order as per usual, and that starts with 304-611, 304-612. The Kia Tigers are on the road facing off against the Samsung Lions. The Lions opened up a plus 150 underdog in a lot of spots, and boy, has this thing been steamed up. As I'm seeing it right now, you're getting the Lions at anywhere between plus 125 and plus 130. Kia Tigers, you're getting anywhere between minus 145 and seeing as high as minus 160 out there. There are a couple of books that have bad juice. At Circa, you're going to be able to get the best total total on this game. Total of 8. Over as just a -115. The under is -105. We're seeing quite a few other places that are listing this at 8.5. Most of these books have the juice at -110 on both sides, and this is a situation in which we're going to be taking the dog, because with the Samsung Lions, you've got Payak Jonhon going for the Samsung Lions, and then when you take a look at the Kia Tigers, it is Yang Hon Jeong going, and Mr. Hon Jeong is a guy that has been able to do a pretty solid job the last couple of years as a starter. He's got an ERA of a 3.68 or lower in all but one of his years ever since 2015, which is pretty darn good, but you take a look at what happened to him in the beginning of the year. He was going up against the Kiwoom Heroes, and I believe that this was the game in which they had that fire breakout, so he was only able to go 3 innings. He wound up giving up 4 runs in that game. This is someone that actually does a solid job of being able to keep the ball in the park, but we also know this about the Kia Tigers. With what happened yesterday, their bullpen got gassed. It was so bad that second baseman Ong Hoon Ho wound up having to close out the game for the team. I think that was his first ever pitching appearance. And Matt Williams, terrific infielder when he was with the San Francisco Giants and the Arizona Diamondbacks. As manager with the Washington Nationals, he flamed out, and he's just not doing a good job with his team and with Kia. If you've watched the past couple broadcasts on ESPN, you'll know that this team's infield fielding is not good, and that is putting it very politely. And then you take a look at the Samsung Lions. They were stuck in neutral a little bit at the beginning of the year with regards to their bats, but they really got it going in the 8th inning yesterday. Actually, technically this morning, but with that said, they were able to get 9 runs in that 8th inning, and that was with Tyler Saladino, their lone American field player, going 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. So that's actually a very encouraging sign for this team. And Samsung has the most shallow ballpark out there in the KBO. They've got sort of these fences that I would compare it to, I guess, Yankee Stadium with the short porches that you see in left and right field. It's very unique. And what you do really want to note with this team is Kun Jang-wook has really been able to match for this team. 667 batting average so far this year. He's been able to do a very solid job. Looks like he's going to get the start in this one. And you've got a bunch of guys that are doing a great job of getting on base. And for Kia, I will say this. Preston Tucker, he's stuck in neutral a little bit, hitting 200, but he's been doing a good job of being able to draw some walks this year. And I really like what I've seen out of Chano Park. He had one of the best catches that you're going to see in the KBO this season. He has been able to do a solid job towards the bottom of the order of getting on base, which is why I do think that this is a total that is a little bit low in this spot. I'm going to wind up taking it over. I think that Kia is going to be able to play even up with regards to the starting pitching. I think that Jean Hon is going to be able to give this team a little bit of something. You take a look at what he's done for Samsung the last 3 years. It's really a get-the-job-done sort of performance. He's had an ERA between a 4.2 and a 4.6 in each out of his last 3 years. This guy is just very good at being able to eat innings. You take a look at what he did towards the end of the 2019 season. He went 5 innings or more in 12 of the team's last 15 games, so he certainly did a good job there, at the very least that he appeared in, so I have to make that a little bit of a distinction. He sometimes is a little bit loose with giving up the home run ball, but I think that that's just the Samsung Lions ballpark in general, so I am going to take this total over. I do think that Samsung might struggle a little bit out of the gates. They might get down a run, but I think it's going to be pretty even up going into the 7th and 8th inning. I think from there, bullpen takes over. Samsung Lions get the job done, so we're taking the plus price, and we're going to be taking this total over. We move on to 304-613, 304-614. You got the LG Twins hitting the road to face off against the undefeated NC Dinos. The Dinos, despite the fact that they're undefeated, it seems like they're a little bit of an endangered species of being able to keep that undefeated record. They find themselves anywhere between plus 130 and plus 122 underdogs. Meanwhile, if you take a look at the LG Twins, you're going to be laying anywhere between minus 142 and seeing as high as minus 160. Total on this game is 9. Over is anywhere between minus 110 and minus 115. Your under is anywhere between minus 110 and minus 105. And this is a spot in which I do think that the Twins are going to be able to get this done. And once again, we saw another big steam move on this game. The Twins opened up in a lot of books anywhere between minus 125 and minus 130. We have seen that get hiked up, and I do think it's for good reason, because with the Twins, they're going to be trotting out there one of their American-born pitchers. That would be Casey Kelly. He was very good during the 2019 season, even if the record doesn't show it. He had a 14-12 record, but a 2.55 ERA, was absolutely superb at being able to keep the ball in the yard. 180 and a third innings, 7 home runs surrendered. Not a swing and miss guy. 126 punch-outs, so certainly did not necessarily do the best of jobs there, but really closed out the 2019 season strong. He wound up having a 1.8 ERA in his final 10 starts. Now, I will say this, Casey Kelly has been a very well-traveled man. I don't know if you saw the ESPN broadcast Saturday morning, but he talked about going from Australia to Korea back to the States, and he had to be quarantined for 14 days, so he wound up having to not throw for about 2 weeks. He's been getting back into the flow the last couple days, so that might be something of note, but why I still like him in the spot is because he's going up against Kim Young-Gayu, and I will give Mr. Gayu this. He looked better towards the end of the 2019 season. In his final 10 appearances with the squad, 2.95 ERA. He had a 5.29 ERA for the year 2019. This is a very young guy, only 20 years old, so there is some upside there, and he's being stretched out a little bit. He was used as a reliever for much of the 2019 season, saw a couple starts towards the end of the year, and he's a little bit herky-jerky. He wound up closing out the 2019 season with a complete game against LG, but prior to that, 3 innings or fewer in his previous 9 appearances. I just don't think that he's going to be able to give the team great length in this one. Now, I will say this, NC Dinos should have very much a healthy bullpen in this one, along with the LG Twins, because as we know, their game got rained out yesterday, so that is a little bit of an advantage. But when you take a look at what you're going to be able to get out of this NC Dinos team, they led the league at home runs last year, but it does feel like this is a team that relies a little bit too much on one big inning. And Nong Soon Bum, a guy that has hit at least 300 in the league ever since 2014, he's off to a little bit of a slow start so far this year. Batting $154, I will give him this. He's been doing a solid job of being able to draw some walks, but with that said, he has been a little bit hit or miss so far this year. Mo Chang Min, this is someone that you certainly do want to take note of. He's hit at least 279 in each of the team's last 5 years as well. This is someone that last year wound up being able to supply the team with only 10 home runs. He's seen a little bit of a dip in his power, so I do think that that's going to be something that needs to take hold as well. And like I said, with Casey Kelly, he does a good job of being able to keep the ball in the yard, and with LG, I think the big key is being able to get some production out of one Roberto Ramos, who is hitting .438 so far this year. This is someone that certainly was a little bit of a washout when it comes to the States, but he has been able to do a very solid job with this team. And I think that Lee Chung Woong is going to be able to get on base as well. This is someone that has hit at least .284 at each of the past 4 seasons for LG. He is very much a good guy when it comes to being able to get on base. 21 stolen bases last year, so very much a speedster. One of the top players when it comes to being able to draw walks as well. And I do think that the LG bullpen is one of the better ones that you're going to find out here in the KBO. They wound up getting spent a lot in their last game against the NC Dinos, so the day off was really big for them. I think that Kelly is going to be able to come out. He's going to be able to give a good performance for LG, and I think that they get the job done. So we're going to be laying the number here with the Twins, and we're going to be taking this total under as well. We move on to 304-615, 304-616. The Kiwoom Heroes are going to be playing us to the Hanwha Eagles. The Eagles find themselves right around a plus 155 underdog. I'm seeing a couple plus 150s as well if you've got bad juice. Meanwhile, with the Heroes, you're going to be laying anywhere between minus 175 and minus 185. Total on this game is 8 over and under, as I'm seeing at most books is minus 110. I am seeing a little bit of variance with regards to the under having more around minus 115 juice, but for the most part, I'm seeing minus 110 on this one. And that's interesting because at Circa, they actually opened this up at 7.5. I just wound up hammering the over because it was the first time I saw a 7.5 all year long in the KBO. And what I think is going to be so fascinating is what happens with Hanwha in this one, because they've got their ace going. In Warwick Seppold, he wound up starting out the year with a flurry. He goes out against the SK Wyverns, pitches a 9-inning complete game shutout, only gave up 2 hits in that one, and he got the shutout with only 2 strikeouts. So I thought that was very fascinating. This is his second year in the KBO. Last year when he was with Hanwha, 12-11 record, but this is someone that eats a lot of innings, 192 and a third innings and 31 starts last year. So you know that this is someone that is very willing to go the distance, has won at least 6 innings in each out of his last 10 starts. So that is going to be big for a Hanwha team that, let's face it, they've been a little bit shaky out of the bullpen. And what I think is going to be interesting with the Heroes is what they get out of Jake Brigham, because he wound up only being able to go 3 1/3 innings in the team season opener against Kia. And the reason why he was only able to go those 3 1/3 innings is because a fire broke out at a nearby building that caused a little bit of a delay, and they didn't want to send him back out there. He was with Kiwoom last year, went 13-5 and was absolutely superb. 28 stars. He wasn't necessarily giving as many innings as Sepulveda, but he did a very good job of being able to keep the ball in the yard. 5 home runs given up in 158 and a third innings. But I will say this with the Heroes. They have been a little bit shaky out of the bullpen, and I just don't know if Brigham is going to be able to give the 7+ innings that this team really desires. I do think that that is something that you do want to take note of. And with the Hanwha Eagles, they are coming off a little bit of a heartbreaking loss yesterday. They were in the lead in that game, but then you had an error compounded with a pass ball, which really cost them. But what I do think is big for this team is the fact that they have been able to stay competitive in a lot of these games, despite the fact that a lot of the guys in the middle of the lineup have not necessarily been able to produce. Choi Jae-hoon is one of the better hitting catchers that you're going to find in the KBO. He had 290 last year, was one of the league leaders when it comes to being able to draw walks. Certainly not a power guy, but he's only batting about $150 so far this year. Kim Tae-koon, who is one of the most wily veterans that you're going to find in the KBO. He's been with the Eagles ever since 2001. He has hit 300 or better in every year ever since 2008. He wound up getting a pinch hitting appearance yesterday. He wound up not starting the game. He is getting a little bit up there in years at age 37, so you have to wonder when he's going to be able to emerge. I think that it could be in this game. And then the big key for this team is being able to get a little bit of something out of Jared Hoying. This is his third year in the KBL. Last year, he wound up hitting 284, and he was able to supply a little bit of pop. 18 home runs despite the fact that the ball was de-juiced. But with that said, this is someone that he hasn't necessarily produced recently for the team. If you date it back to the end of last year, he's got only a grand total of 5 hits in the team's last 10 games. I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a slump buster for him. I think that Brigham is someone that is going to wind up being a little bit all over the place, just because I think that having that layoff a few days ago is going to throw him for a bit of a loop. He sometimes has a little bit of an issue with the walks. He gives up about 3 walks per 9 innings, and I do think that this is a spot in which the Eagles are going to be able to get to him, and I think that the Eagles are going to be able to get to a Kiwoom bullpen that has been used quite a bit the last couple days. They've had to use their main closer each of the last 2 days, so Kiwoom probably not going to have that luxury in their arsenal. I think that the Eagles get the job done, so we're going to take the plus price. I think that the Eagles are going to be able to hang 5+ on the board, so we're going to be taking this total over as well. We move on to 304-617, 304-618. The Lotte Giants are going to be playing against the SK Wyverns. Lotte actually opened up as an underdog in a couple spots. Now, as we're seeing it, they are finding themselves a pretty significant favorite, playing anywhere between -125 and I'm seeing at circa they've went all the way up to -142. As for the Wyverns, they're anywhere between even money and at circa +122. So certainly shop around on this one. Total on this game is 9. The over is juiced of -115. The under is -105. The books seem to have really settled in on that one. And what I will say about SK is that they were really one of the best teams when it comes to relief pitching last year, and they're probably going to need it in this one, as Kim Tae-hoon is going to be getting the start. This is just his first start ever since the beginning of the 2018 season. He's made a career 195 appearances. This is just his 13th start, so certainly going to be a little bit of a change up there. Meanwhile, for the Lotte Giants, they're sending out their action Dan Straley from the States, and with Straley, this is someone that, as we know, he was a complete and utter failure with the Orioles. He had a couple, I guess you could call them okay moments with the Florida/Miami Marlins, but with that said, he never really was great there. Was a little bit erratic in his first start against KT. He wound up having 3 walks in 5 2/3 innings, but did a good job of being able to evade a little bit of danger, and I think that it is going to be a situation in which Lotte is going to be able to put it up on SK. I do think that we are going to see quite a few runs from the Giants in this one, which is why I'm going to be leaning over. And the guy that you really need to know for Lotte, how about Dae-Ho Lee? This is one of the most wily veterans that you're going to find out there in the KBO, and if that name sounds familiar, it is the same gentleman that spent the 2016 season with the Seattle Mariners. He has just been a stalwart when it comes to Japanese and Korean baseball. He's a guy that he's just going to give you 20+ home runs every year. He's going to hit above 300. He is getting a little bit up there in years, but that's why you bring in their Dixon Machado. Dixon Machado spent last year at the AAA level for the Chicago Cubs out in Iowa, and so far this year, it looks like he's hitting about 600, so he has been able to do a very good job of being able to get on base. And the Lotte Giants, as far as a runs per game standard, they lead the league. They have scored at least 7 runs in every one of their games so far this year. They were able to make a big comeback on SK 2 days ago. They wound up having their game for, I guess you could call it Saturday morning. It's still really weird saying that, rained out, but with that said, they were able to pull off that nice comeback. They were able to win the game in extra innings, and that does remind me, if a game goes past 12 innings, it is going to be ruled as a tie because of just the random rules that we have this year with the coronavirus and everything like that. But with SK, they are probably going to have a little bit more in the arsenal when it comes to their relief pitching. But last year was terrific. You're just not seeing it this year for this team. You're seeing guys like Park Min-ho, who had a 2.68 ERA for the team last year. He's really reverting back to his 2018 form, in which he had a 15.43 ERA. He only saw a couple appearances with the team because he was injured and he was up and down with what used to be the Korean version of the minor league. So I do think that that is something that you want to take note of. And the Lotte Giants, they seem to have done a much better job of being able to fix up their bullpen. I think that Dan Straley is probably going to wind up giving up 2 or 3 runs, but he does give a quality start. I think that the Giants continue on their just terroristic offensive way. So we're going to be laying it here with the Giants, and we're going to be taking this total over. And we go to the last game on the Las Vegas betting board. That would be 304-619, 304-620. The Doosan Bears are going to be playing host to the KT Wiz. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you know that because of the way their mascot looks, the KT Wiz are known as the Smiling Blobs. And if you're taking a look at the Smiling Blobs, you're going to be getting some pretty favorable juice here. You're going to be getting anywhere between plus 155 and plus 160. If you're looking at the Doosan Bears, at minimum, you're going to be laying minus 180. I'm seeing at some books this is as high as minus $2. And then the total on this game is 9.5. Seeing a straggler 10. If you're looking at that 10, the under is just a minus 120. The over is even. If you're taking a look at the 9.5, over is just anywhere between minus 115 and minus 120. Under is anywhere between even and minus 105. And I'm just taking a look at the Doosan Bears in this one. They are going to have the same pitching matchup that I gave you on this podcast yesterday, because their game for what was supposed to be Saturday morning did get rained out. As for the Doosan Bears, it is going to be Lee Yong-chan and it is going to be Kim Min going for the KT Wiz. And with the Smiling Blobs for Mr. Min, he wound up going 6-12 last year with 4.96 ERA. He ended the year with a little bit of a rough stretch. It just felt like he was getting a little bit worse as the season went along, as he wound up having the ERA north of 5 in his last 10 starts. He just wound up getting lit up like a Christmas tree. This is someone that gives up just a little bit too much hard contact, gave up 16 home runs in about 150 innings last season, and he is a guy that he issues a free pass. 65 walks last year as well. And then when you take a look at what you're able to get out of Doosan, this is a bunch that has one of the best bullpens out there in the KBO. It's a big reason why they were the KBO champions last year. They were stunned a little bit when they got a bad start against KT Wiz a few days ago. But with that said, this is still a team that I think should be able to get the job done. They have been a little bit hit or miss with the bats, which is why I'm going to be taking a look at this total under, especially if you're able to get that 10 at 9.5. I would try to be able to get even juice, so that way you're able to minimize things a little bit. But I do think that this is going to be a spot in which KT is going to have a little bit of a tough time scoring, because with KT, a little bit of a hit or miss team. They were able to get 12 runs 2 days ago on this Doosan Bears team, and it was spread across 22 hits. This is not a team that necessarily has great power numbers. Mel Rojas Jr., he is a good masher. He had 24 home runs for the team in 2019, 43 home runs a year before. So far this year, he's hitting .562. I do think that this is someone that might get cooled down a little bit more in this game, but when you take a look at some of the table setters, like a Kim Min-hyuk, he wound up hitting .281 last season with KT, and he had taken a couple years on hiatus from the KBO. I think that he was playing out there in the Japanese league, so he has been a little bit all over the place and has never hit a home run in the KBO. And then you've got Kang Baek-ho. He wound up hitting .336 for this team last year, but once again, not necessarily a masher. 13 home runs, and he's hitting in the 3 spot. So I do think that this is a good spot for Doosan to be able to keep the ball in the yard. And then when you take a look at Doosan as well, they've got the league leader in hits from last year in Jose Miguel Fernandez. This is someone that had 197 hits last season. He doesn't necessarily have great pop in the bat. He had 15 home runs last year, but that's what you've got Kim Jae-hoon in there for. Kim Jae-hoon. This is someone that has hit at least .325 in 3 of the team's last 4 seasons, and prior to last year, had 35 plus home runs in each of the previous 3 years. He had a little bit of a power outage last year. I do think that that's going to be coming back. The Doosan Bears are the reigning champs for a reason. I do think that the day off really helps out this bullpen. I think that they should be able to handle our good friends at the Smiling Blob. So for that reason, we are going to be taking the run line here with the Doosan Bears. As I'm seeing it right now, with regards to the run line, it is varying a little bit. At Circus Sports, you're seeing it at even juice. I know that Caesars, they are offering this at even juice as well. I know that there are a couple offshore books that are giving you a little bit of a plus number, so I encourage anything at even juice or better when it comes to the run line, and we're going to be taking this total under as well. And that will wrap things up for the Baseball Betting Podcast with myself, Greg Peterson. A big thanks to our guest, Jeff Parles of the Vegas Stats and Information Network, and the new podcast, Sports chance, who knows, for joining me in the last segment. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you ever have a question for the podcast, write it into my timeline at @G_D1. Hopefully you're all safe, healthy, and doing well. And if I don't talk to you guys once again tomorrow, I plan to, but there could be a little bit of mixing and shaking going on since we are not going to be having any Monday games in the KBO. At the very latest, I'll be talking to you guys on Tuesday. Thank you so much for tuning in.